Hey everyone, welcome to the first official episode of Unraveling Politics. I'm glad that you decided to come and join us, and today we're going to discuss the news of the last few days, and let's just say there's been a lot going on. First of all, we're going to be covering three main stories today. First, we're going to be, as you can see in the title, we're going to be talking about Mike Johnson, and he was almost ousted in his bid as Speaker. In Marjorie Taylor Greene's bid to remove him as Speaker of the House. We're going to be talking about the Trump trial. We're also going to be talking about the war in the Middle East. Those have been the three big issues of the day. So, let's start with Mike Johnson. So, if you are not aware, this didn't really hit the news very much, but Mike Johnson was I wouldn't say almost, but he faced a vote of removal from his job as Speaker of the House. So, let's tell the story here. Kevin McCarthy, who was the last Speaker of the House, was removed in October by Democrats with the help of far-right rebels. It was the rebels that really initiated it. Rebels like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Andy Biggs. So these are conservative Republicans. They are usually against any kind of compromise with the Biden administration and with the Democrats. So this is something that they really wanted that, and ever since Mike Johnson became Speaker, because he was supposed to be the one that they were happy with. He's a conservative from Louisiana, and in the recent months since he became Speaker, which was back in October, he has been compromising with the Democrats, because that's kind of necessary when you're Speaker of the House and Democrats control the Senate and Joe Biden is president. You will need to be doing some kind of compromise. However, far-right Republicans, they don't seem to understand. Their attitude has always been, if we just stonewall, if we block, if we scream as loud as we can, eventually the other side will crumble to our demands, and that almost never happens. So, what really triggered this vote was Mike Johnson allowing the aid to Ukraine to get through. And he'd been blocking it for months. It's not just aid to Ukraine, but it's also aid to Israel, which we'll talk about Israel later, as well as help to Taiwan and among other places. So Marjorie Taylor Greene, what she wanted to do was, ahead of the vote, she said that she made a couple of announcements. She said that she wanted Mike Johnson to follow these demands. Now, I'm trying to bring up the demands here, and here we go. So, first, she said she wanted Mike Johnson to abide by the Hastert Rule. Now, what is the Hastert Rule? It means that it's a rule that was installed during the time of House Speaker Dennis Hastert, but he was Speaker during the 2000s, and it basically says that a bill will not be brought to the floor that does not have the support by the majority of Republicans. So it was something that it's supposed to stop a bunch of Democrats and a handful of Republicans from supporting bills and getting it through the floor. It's not like law, it's not official, and that's why it's always been kind of in flux, which is why it hasn't been followed in recent years. So, in this Congress is what I mean, because when the Democrats are in power, obviously the Hastert Rule doesn't apply. So, here's an example of the Hastert Rule being violated. The Ukraine aid was passed 311 to 112. 101 Republicans voted yes, and 112 Republicans voted no. So it did not have the support of the majority of Republicans. And that's what pissed Greene off. Then secondly, she wants to cut off aid for Ukraine, which is going to anger Democrats. So what you're going to notice is Greene is trying to separate Johnson from the Democrats. She's trying to put him in an impossible situation here. Then third, he wants to defund Special Counsel Jack Smith's office, which Johnson seemed to be open to doing. That's the one that's investigating President Trump, former President Trump, specifically with the January 6th and classified documents trial. So fourth, Greene wants the lower house to pass 12 individual appropriations bills to fund the government by September 30th rather than bundling into them in omnibus or minibus packages. So that's that doesn't really mean too much for us average people. But what is important, though, is she says if we don't get our 12 separate bills, she wanted a 1% spending cut across the board, which I'm not even sure how you do, because Social Security is not up for negotiation. Interest on the debt is also not up for negotiation. So, needless to say, these were kind of vapid requests. They were never going to happen. Mike Johnson said this was not negotiation, so she decided to put her motion up to vacate the floor. It was moved to table the motion, which basically means we're not going to vote on it. It was passed 350. The motion to table was 359 to 43. Just 10 Republicans voted with Greene, 7 Democrats voted present, 196 Republicans and 163 Democrats voted to kill Greene's motion, along with 11 Republicans and 32 Democrats voted to move forward with her motion. So this is, as I wrote in the title, a coalition of chaos, where you have moderate Republicans and moderate Democrats working together to keep a Republican speaker. I never thought I'd ever see that happen, but that's what we saw this past week. So, Mike Johnson, he said, "I appreciate the show of effort, confidence from my colleagues to defeat this misguided effort. Hopefully this will be the end of the personality politics and frivolous character assassination that has defined the 118th Congress. It's regrettable, it's not who we are as Americans, and we're better than this. We need to get beyond it." So, needless to say, I don't think this will be the last we've seen of this. I wouldn't be surprised if we see another effort to remove Mike Johnson sometime in September or October, right around the time when we need to fund the government again, because that's when we pass government funding bills, in October. So, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she said this is the uniparty that people are watching, and to be quite honest, I can't entirely disagree with her. It definitely does look like that. And House Democrats, though, they're the ones that saved him. They had said that they are not committing to saving Johnson again. This is important because if Johnson loses the support of Democrats, he cannot remain as Speaker. And the reason why this is important is because if the House plunges back into chaos like it did back in October, then we need to find a new speaker, and we're probably not going to be able to do that for quite a while. Now, if we were in a parliamentary system of democracy, the House of Representatives, if there would be something called a vote of confidence. If the vote of confidence fell, then we would have to hold a new election. But because we have fixed terms, we can't do that. So that is the big issue there. So this will probably, as I said, not be the end. It'll probably be it for now in terms of Greene. But Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think she's crazy, but she's not stupid. She was stupid to put this up for a vote now, but she could definitely have Johnson lose the support of Democrats, because eventually that's going to have to happen. All right. So the next issue is probably the war in the Middle East. I would say this has been the big issue of the week, along with the Trump trial. So Biden has been saying, or first, let me start. Israel is entering into Rafah, which is a city in southern Gaza. The city hasn't really, as far as I know, been attacked up until this point. Most of the Israeli military's fury has been focused in the north, and Israel has said that if Biden pulls aid, which it looks like he will, that Israel will stand alone. Biden's ultimatum: Biden said that we will not send any more weapons if he invades Rafah, which Netanyahu now has. The ultimatum was the first time a president or any other official in its administration has said publicly that an Israeli ground operation in Rafah will result in a halt of supply of weapons. And we did hold back some weapons. However, Netanyahu is saying we don't need the weapons, which is, if that's what he's saying, then I'm like, fine, then we don't have to give you any more weapons. So that's going to be a big problem for the Biden administration, especially politically, because as we've seen in certain primaries, like in Michigan, which has a big Arab American population, there was a lot of people who voted uncommitted in the primary. So the Democratic Party is divided on the war in the Middle East. And that could be a problem going into the general election. The Republicans have their divisions too, but this could be a problem for the Democrats. So, and also this is something that broke 2 days ago. The U.S. says that Israel may have violated humanitarian law using American weapons. Now, if you ask me, this was kind of obvious. This has kind of been obvious for months. Hospitals have been bombed. Schools have been bombed. Things have now. Some people say that the bombing those places were necessary. I'm not saying that, but some people have said that. There was a 46-page unclassified report that President Biden ordered this year in response to a growing alarm from Democrats in Congress about Israel's conduct in the conflict. So, they have stopped the aid of to Palestinian civilians, and it has been. And the report says it is reasonable to assess that U.S. defense articles have been used by the Israelis since October 7th in instances inconsistent with international law. That is not a surprise. The Palestinian death toll is now about 35,000. I wouldn't be surprised if it's even higher than that. And if you remember, only 1,200 Israelis were killed in the initial border attack all the way back on October 7th. So Republicans, on the other hand, have been saying that this is a distraction. They're pretty united. They want to continue to support Israel. President Trump has said that he will continue to support Israel. He's going off after Biden for being weak, which is pretty usual for Trump. So as this war continues, it's going to be a big problem for the Democrats in the coming election. So back home, this is more personal. Luckily, there weren't any protests on my college campus, but there has been all across the country, and it's been a big problem for administrators. Graduations have been canceled. I haven't heard about it much in recent days, possibly because graduations have started to recede. There's still a couple coming up across the country for sure, but it does seem to be, the protests do seem to be less in the news recently. I haven't seen that much, but there have been some demands that protesters have made. Like, their big demand is divesting from Israel. They want universities to stop companies from divesting in Israel. And speaking of Israel, speaking of this whole conflict, I also wanted to mention there was a Palestinian bid to make Palestine a member of the United Nations. 143 countries voted yes, 25 abstained, 9 said no, including us and Israel. This motion was brought up by the United Arab Emirates, and the Palestinian Authority will now be a non-voting member. They can co-sponsor bills and amendments and introduce proposals. They can request full membership, but the United States will likely use our veto because we are a member of the UN Security Council along with Russia, China, France, and Britain. So any one of us gets a motion to veto. So, all right. And the last thing I want to talk about is the Trump trial. So this has been pretty explosive this week. The biggest thing of the week was probably the testimony of Stormy Daniels. So Stormy Daniels went on the stand, and the Trump team tried to declare a mistrial after Stormy Daniels basically inadvertently accused or implied that Trump may have raped her. Now, here's what she said. She said that she blacked out during the sexual encounter, but she said she wasn't drugged or raped. But usually when you say you blacked out during sex, that means that you were raped. So the judge did not declare a mistrial. If you ask me, Trump is right to be pretty angry about that because now that that's been planted in the juror's head. This encounter occurred back in 2006. Now remember this: Trump is 77 years old right now. He was 60 back then. She was in his 20s. So if this encounter did happen, which Trump denies, then there was a 35 plus year age gap. So I definitely hope this didn't happen. The only thing that makes me suspicious is Trump. This Trump-Daniels encounter, if it did in fact happen, happened 18 years ago. She remembers this pretty clearly, which would surprise me. People can't remember things from like 8 days ago, much less 18 years ago. So I would be really skeptical of this report, of this testimony. But then again, that's kind of what's going on. People have not let that go. So, including Stormy Daniels. As for next week, or as for this coming week, Michael Cohen will come on the stand, as well as one more witness, and this will be the last witness. So this could also be the last week. So the defense may rest its case later this week. So our next episode, we might be picking up with the last of the defense, the prosecution. The prosecution will lay their case. So our next episode, we might be covering what the defense might say, and once the defense is done, then there's going to be closing arguments, and the trial will be over. This trial could probably be over right around Memorial Day, and the jury will deliberate. Who knows how long that'll take, and then we might get a ruling sometime around the 1st of June. So, if you ask me, this case is pretty weak. This is definitely the weakest case against Donald Trump, but this is also the only case that's going to be against Donald Trump before the general election, almost certainly. So the other ones are the Georgia case, which has been indefinitely delayed. The classified documents trial is also delayed, and it's the classified docs that's delayed. The Georgia case is the one there with the lady who was with the DA who was dating her lead prosecutor. There's talks of removing her from the case, so that would delay it even more. And the January 6th case is waiting on the Supreme Court to declare whether Trump has presidential immunity. So those are the big three. But if Trump becomes president and then the trial goes forward, he can just tell the special counsel to dismiss the classified documents case as well as the January 6th case. So if he could get those dismissed once he's president, he'll only have to worry about the Georgia case. And then again in Georgia, which was the one where he told the Secretary of State of Georgia to find 12,000 votes. So that's going to be really interesting in the coming days and weeks to see what unfolds. The original date of the classified documents trial was supposed to be next week. It is a bit unusual that there is no date set for now. That is pretty unusual because this basically could mean there could be no date to plan around. So that is unusual from what legal experts have said in the news. I also want to say we're going to be getting an inflation report coming on Wednesday, so that's going to be really important for the Biden administration. My guess, of course, guessing what inflation is like, it's always, you never know. But I would expect inflation to be roughly the same, maybe a bit higher, especially because gas prices are a little bit higher this year than it was last year. So, and things are continuing to get more expensive. But remember, when inflation goes down, that does not mean prices are going down. It just means that the prices are increasing at a slower rate. That seems to be a confusion among a lot of people. And the last big thing I want to say is this is something I briefly saw I wanted to let people know about. The Real ID deadline, which is on May 7th of 2025, is the final deadline. So without getting too much into it, the Real ID Act was passed in 2005, so 19 years ago, and it was supposed to be a more secure form of identification to board airports, airplanes, as well as bases like military bases, and federal courthouses. So the deadline has been extended. It will not be extended again. Now, if you have a passport already, you don't need to really worry about getting a Real ID. But if you've been flying around with your regular driver's license and you do not have a Real ID, that will be coming to an end on May the 7th. So highly recommend you get it as soon as possible. I was able to, in Pennsylvania, get mine online, which is great. I don't know about other states, but that would be a really good idea to do that. Okay, so that is all we have for this episode. I want to thank you for tuning in. We will be back on Monday next week, and hopefully we'll have some more interesting things to talk about. Thank you for tuning in.